Hey guys, Kinggath here with another episode of the Kinggath podcast. Today's guest is working on another overhaul mod that I don't think has gotten a ton of press, and it's covering a very, very unique idea, which is what does Fallout look like outside of the United States? So welcome prilladog, who's going to talk to us about Fallout London.
Hi, Ginga. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for making the time. I know you're on a little vacation right now, so I'm glad you were able to find some time to do this. Fallout
Of
London
course.
is, like I said in the intro, is doing something very interesting because we don't really hear much about what's happening in the Fallout universe outside of the U.S., and I think there's so much room for storytelling outside of it.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, we are literally just creating Fallout in London. And we're going to take a slightly different approach to it because you always have the American themes, and that's something very prevalent throughout all of the series. And we just bring in the London aesthetic to the game.
Yeah, and I think London makes a great backdrop, as we saw. I mean, if you've seen the previews for Watch Dogs, I guess it's 3 now. Like, it looks beautiful. Like that, you can there's plenty of awesome stuff to see in there that you can make use of for gaming. Now, what are you guys doing as far as scale? Like, are you focusing on a certain section of the city? Are you going to do kind of what Bethesda does, where they're taking highlights from it and reimagining it? Like, how are you focusing on the actual recreation of London? Because it's a huge city. There's lots of cool stuff there. There's plenty of pieces to choose from.
Yes, the actual London in real life is ever expanding. Even where I live, it never used to be part of London until the 60s, and now it's part of London. So we can't obviously put that in the game because you'd be looking at something like 10 times the size of the Fallout 4 vanilla game.
Right.
So now we're going to have to take elements of what they've done, which is sort of chop bits out, change little bits, but we still need to give the London theme. So in order to do that, we're going to make areas either cut off or inaccessible, or just generally put as much stuff as we can in so you can feel like it's London without it being just a walking simulator.
Sure. Yeah, and I actually really like the way Bethesda approaches it with taking some of the major elements, and you get like little, maybe they recreate certain blocks or buildings so that it feels authentic, but they basically, you just want to give that feel without needing to do a one-to-one recreation. Like, I know it's cool to go into like Assassin's Creed and see that they did damn near one-to-one recreations of old cities and stuff, but it's really not necessary, I think, to give the general look and feel. So is there
Yeah,
any? Oh, go ahead.
I definitely agree with that. Like, we spoke to our community because we're very heavily Discord focused. We always talk to people, and they said that our original. I mean, I'll be honest. Our original scale was so huge. Even when I started playtesting it, I was getting bored, and I wanted more. So we really drastically scaled it down so that you can actually walk from one place to the other. You can see interesting things without you having to do every back alley where there's nothing of any import down there. So yeah,
Right.
we've definitely sort of got it at the correct scale that we're really happy with at the moment. And we're even contemplating doing a stepped release where we might even release a much smaller map, and that way the people can play it and then give us feedback and then expand on it rather than just give them a big wad of map that
Yeah.
they might not enjoy. So we might even do a stepped release as well.
I love that idea. I'm a big fan of doing step releases, as we've been doing with some settlements. It's just because it's a great way to make sure you don't derail yourself from the vision, because sometimes you can feature creep yourself into kind of ruining the design of your own product, of like, where it's like you have all these massive ideas, and with all this you have unchecked freedom with no budgets or anything, that it can be easy to have things spiral out of control. Whereas if you're aiming for little milestones, you get that community feedback in between to help keep you on track.
Exactly, I 100% agree. And plus, because this is nothing that anyone has done before, it's very easy for us to say, right, we'll have this entire area be one faction, this be something else, and then, oh, we're just suddenly going off. We've completely gone off project. We've been working on something for months. It's just like small little targets, achieve them, and then go on and on and on.
Yeah, it's super motivating for the team too, because you get the feedback, and everybody knows their work is appreciated.
Exactly, exactly. And we're working with some very well-known modders in the community. We've got people like Crypt, and we've got some people from the Fallout Miami team who have been helping us out. So we actually know sort of what we're doing in terms of how we're going to release it now. So we've
Oh,
got a
that's
very good
fantastic.
project working with us. Yeah.
Now, this is something I wanted to ask, but it's not particularly important to me. But I know a lot of people like to hear this. because I don't think it's relevant to the quality of a gaming experience. But how big do you think your map is if you compare it to the Commonwealth?
Far Harbor is what we've based ours off.
Okay.
Um, Originally, we were going to go with the Fallout 4 size, which was 32 by 32, if I remember correctly. But now we're going down for, I think it's around 15 by 15.
Okay. So about half the size of the Commonwealth. I
Yeah.
actually don't even know what are those units you're using? Are you talking about cells?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, because I think the game world is like 96. It's like negative 96 to 96, but I think a lot of that is just ocean or the dead, or like the glowing sea. So I don't know exactly how much of that is
Yeah.
actual landmass that you can play on.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
but
mean, even what I said is not the direct playable area because you need to have out of bounds. Sorry, got a bit technical for you.
that's all good. Yeah, occasionally I dip into that with people. Like like if I get a programmer on here, I just go all nerd on the papyrus, and I'm sure everybody's like their eyes are glossing over. Um, but yeah, so that's a I think Fair Harbor is a totally awesome size to aim for because that was a very very well fleshed out DLC. Like it's very you never felt like you were in space that was unused, and there was always a fair number of quests in every area, and like just everything felt like it had a good amount of lore. So like that, I think that's an awesome target.
Yeah, and we've had feedback where some people say that Far Harbor's too small for London, but what they need to remember is Far Harbor, it has lots of water on it.
Yeah,
We would be using Far Harbor size, but the only water that's going through it is the Thames, so it will be blocked out as a city.
right. Yeah, that'll be interesting. So are you doing? So then, are you not going to have? I guess this is something where you might be breaking free from the traditional Fallout model. Is usually, and this had to do with technical limitations, I think, more than anything else, is that Fallout tends to always be kind of broad countryside with a city or two available in it, and then most of the overworld is all just just like that. Like I said, like kind of countryside. It's open area. There's a few houses here and there, maybe some interesting landmarks. Are you breaking free of that and doing your entire map is just going to be parts of the city?
We've definitely took a more Fallout 3 approach by
Okay.
having a lot more focus on the city, but the way we've divided it up is we feel quite unique because we have certain factions that live inside these big sort of blast walls, etc. It will allow the player to be able to walk around a city, then come up to this enclosed area. So you won't have the problem of walking through like Vanilla's Boston, where you just start losing frame rate, everything's going on, and it lags. You'll
Yeah.
literally be walking around. So you have sort of south of London where you'll have countryside and dotted cities. Then you would cross over and you'd have the city of London and then lots of city. And then you'd have these big walled off areas, which would allow you to walk through into a completely different world space. So it gives your computer a chance to relax and then actually build up another city inside itself. So
Yeah.
you'll be sort of, in the way, we're sort of building two, maybe three maps because of the way we've divided it up, but it should mean that it's slightly more optimized so you won't have this horrific frame rate that vanilla gave you.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to hear because that's definitely a problem. Many people like, can't even play the game in Boston just to how bad it is.
Yeah,
Um,
I am one of them. That's why I am the forefront of this idea. I've modded my game so much, I now do not go to Boston.
that's something interesting. One of the things I remember reading a long time ago about Blizzard is they used to make their developers work on average gaming machines for the time, knowing that they wanted to make sure that as they were developing, they experienced the pain of sub optimization, like all through development. I don't know that they do that anymore, but I think that's
That's
generally.
a fantastic idea. Many more should do that.
I agree. I try and dev on I'm actually developing on my older gaming machine because I kind of took that lesson to heart. I feel like it's good enough for Blizzard. It's probably a good enough lesson for me to follow. Um,
Yeah,
but one of the things I find that's frustrating about the Fallout 4 engine is that depending on the hardware, like not even quality, it's just the stability can change randomly. Like I've seen people show me their gaming rigs, like their specs, and they're just far and beyond anything I have, and their game crashes all the time in certain circumstances. Like I have
yeah.
no idea why that is. Doesn't make any sense. I think it's just a matter of you've got some elements of old engine tech that just don't work well with certain combinations of hardware, which is frustrating.
No, completely. I mean, I would say one of the biggest things which is stalling our development is the fact that we are working on the creation engine which there are literally days where I have changed nothing on my computer. It's in the same position, or I haven't used it, and it just crashes every 5 minutes. And it's
Ugh.
like,
Yeah, that's
on the
that's
mod
awful.
today. Then
That
the next day, it works fine like a dream. It's crazy.
that I mean, this is one of so like I've always been on the side of Bethesda. I understand why they don't like. I don't buy into the idea that the creation engine itself is necessarily a huge problem. In that, mostly what they're talking about with it is it's kind of their workflow tools. You know, they understand how their quest system works and all that. And every engine has its own version of all those things. So I think a lot of it is that, like, that workflow. But I kind of am on the side of they should switch to another engine, just because then they get a full team focus to it. Like, for example, like Unity is going to have way more engine developers working on it than Bethesda can afford to put on theirs. So like it's just a matter of, focus. Like you can only focus on so many different things in your company. And so like if they didn't have a split focus of like here, they got this small team working on an engine, if they were using somebody else's engine, it would be up to date and constantly kept up with all the hardware. And that's, I think, one of the downsides of using these in-house engines like they're doing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, 100%.
But I personally I've kind of like fallen in love with the with certain parts of the creation kit workflow. Like I think it's just after, it's one of those things where once you master a piece of software, then it's just like it feels difficult to imagine using anything else. Have you found yourself in a similar situation, or do you find a lot of the CK stuff frustrating?
I mean, when I first started, it was like the learning curve is pretty much like, if you imagine like a chart going up, it's nearly 90 degrees. You need to understand. And then I had a break. This was back in Skyrim when I first started. And then I had a break. And then coming back to do this, I was like, oh, I'm so rusty. And then again, the learning curve. But now I'm back and I'm able to build worlds quite quickly. And yeah, it's very easy to me. But we have some people who are branching out from the 3D modeling side and saying, oh, we'd love to help you with some creation kit. And then it's just like, right, here's some videos, because if I sit and try and teach you, then this will just go on and on and on and on. We won't be able to actually progress. So it's sort of, you need to try and catch up and learn quickly, and then you can help us out in that department.
Yeah. Yeah, it does feel like there's so many. One of the things that like I praise Bethesda and curse them for is, especially with Fallout 4 more than any of the other games, is they've kind of systemized and like abstracted everything to where it's super customizable, but then it makes it really hard to understand how it all comes together. Like understanding how like weapons or armor work, it takes so long to like wrap your head around because there's so many different records at play that it's like to teach that to somebody new is pretty challenging.
Definitely. That's why we've reached out to members of the community that are experts in their field. We have a new gun coming up, which is the M72 Gauss rifle, which is from one of the original Fallout games. I don't know how our gun and weaponsmith managed to make that. I just nod, smile, and agree. But it looks amazing. It works amazing. It's all animated. So we should hopefully be releasing that soon. But he asked me for feedback and what he can do better. And I just go, okay, it looks nice. I can do creation kit, I can run the mod, but in terms of making weapons, that's his forte. And
Yeah.
we have the same with people creating armor. Like Truly Brits, he's been making some amazing stuff. And I can give him the historical viewpoint on things and say, like the Brody helmet needs this tweak and that tweak. But in terms of how he makes it, beyond me.
Right, right. Yeah, there's so many. Yeah, I try to. I had a conversation with Chesko not too long ago, and we were talking about how it's possible to learn all this stuff, but then you're never going to master any of it. And then he made the point of you only have so many skills you have time to master in your life. Like if you figure each one takes 10 years to master, then how many skills is that? And it's like, okay, that's a very good point. I need to stop trying to learn everything.
That's very profound. That's a very profound comment. I like it.
Because it's like, yeah, if you think about average lifespan and you don't really get good at learning skills until you're probably at least a teenager, then really what do you get to learn? Like 6-7 skills in your whole life? Like that's pretty nuts.
Yeah, we actually have, I mean, people call it controversial, but we are completely fine with having younger members of our team. Like, I know many teams out there say 18 is the minimum before you can even get involved. But we've got some younger members on our team, and they can create things far better than I ever could. And that's just because they loved it. They've started it since they were like, I don't know, 15 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, technology that advanced didn't exist when I was 15, but either way. But
Right.
yeah, so they started it when they're 15. I think they're now like 16, 17, and the things they're creating for our mod is absolutely amazing. So yeah, it's you are given a time scale in life, and I think if you start mastering it early, I also personally think you shouldn't be hampered.
It's very interesting to see what the newer generations who are growing up with computers in their hands right from like early childhood, like how much further ahead they can get than some of us who grew up with no computers, where it's like they're gonna intuit a lot more of it that we probably we'll never have it the same grasp as they do. Just
Yeah.
like viewing the world through that lens that computers are just always there, like that's going to be very interesting to see what kind of stuff comes out of the generations like that.
No, completely. And we actually utilize that in a way by actually having, because we'll have an idea of, because our mod is actually set quite earlier than some of the other franchise. We have our historical viewpoint, so we're like, oh, they wouldn't have computers at this point, or they wouldn't look like this. And some of our younger generations are like, oh, that's a point, because they're so used to computers,
Yeah.
and their skill sets from that. It's quite amusing because when they're sitting there, and some of our team are using some old school type editing program, and all these youngsters are running around with Photoshop that they still get on their student passes for half price, and we're
Yeah.
like, how do we get that? And we can't because we're old fuddy duddies. So.
Oh, that's funny. So, what are you guys doing as far as lore? Because this is one of those points of contention I think you're going to run into at the community, where some people are going to have their own thoughts on the way, what does the world outside of the United States look like. There's going to be some people who are super lore nerds who are going to be like, all right, I've read through every manual about that and every snippet of information that Bethesda and Obsidian have released, and all the fanfic or not fanfic, the like official released fiction and stuff that goes in the background. Have you guys taken the time to research all that so that you can stick to it, or are you taking a little bit of liberty?
We have a dedicated writing department that has researched and read every single thing that has come out of Bethesda's mouth or Obsidian's mouth or whoever's mouth that relates to England, the United Kingdom, or Europe. Unfortunately, there is not a lot. So with that in mind, what they have said, we have taken as an absolute that
Okay.
must be adhered to on every way. But then we have to start putting in the gaps ourselves, but logically. So we had a recent discussion on our Discord about Mr. Handies. Now, Mr. Handies are obviously very American,
Mm-hmm.
but it does say that there was an earthquake in Mexico City, and that the Mr. Handy's become a big selling point for the company because they started selling them to Mexico. So thus we can extrapolate that because they were sold to Mexico, they're a big international company, they would probably have reached other countries as well.
Yeah.
But then we must draw a line because it specifically says that the Mr. Gutsies were American specific.
Okay.
So we can't have Mr. Gutsies, but there's no reason why we couldn't have the odd Mr. Handy going around, because why not? It's a big international company. So we have to
Right.
fill in the gaps slightly. So there are things that we have to adhere to, and there are things and gaps that we have to fill in.
Yeah.
Now,
So,
in order
so does
to
the Mr.
explain,
Handy have an American accent in your mouth then?
oh, okay. So I put this out as a joke originally on Discord, and the feedback we had was overwhelming. We had no intentions of giving it an American accent. It was purely a meme that I sent out there. But the feedback was universal. So, yes, they will have an American
That's
accent.
amazing. Yeah, I think that seems like such perfect Fallout humor, where you'd almost think like you'd walk up to a Mr. Handy in the London version, it would start talking to you with the British accent, and they'd be like, "Oh no, I'm just kidding, yeah," and then it would switch to the American accent or something. Like that seems like it
Yeah.
would be such a perfect Fallout joke. Love it.
Yes, we had good fun going through, and bearing in mind that a lot of the before we started outsourcing some of our voice actors, we had a lot of people who were just trying to send in their voice, and we appreciate everything we receive from all of our followers. But a lot of people are Americans putting on British accents and saying, can I be part of the mod? Here's my British accent." So all of the devs, did have a little bit of fun when we were trying to work out who would do the Mr. Handy accent. when we're all putting things out there in our British accents as Americans. So it's very much like, "Howdy, y'all! I'm Mr. Handy," that sort of stuff. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's
so
great.
we'll get someone proper in for that, I think.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, people doing different accents is really amusing like that with the because there's such a big international community with the Bethesda games that it's like you don't really need to have people doing accents. You can generally find an actor from who has that accent naturally to do that stuff. So like I know we have a ton of people from the UK in our voice acting squad, and so like then asking any of our American actors to do like a Mr. Handy just seems stupid. It's just like there's plenty of
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
that's
exactly. There is no reason. I mean, even in our team alone, we have such a diverse team that we've got some Americans. We had Blazer, who did one of our initial monthly videos. His voice was fine. He tried saying that he could do one of the British announcers, and it's like, no, no, we can do that. We can do the British. We can do the Americans. So
yeah. So I mean that actually seems like a really cool and interesting storytelling point, and how you could do some throwback for a little nostalgia for folks is to have there could be some number of because even if we branch off from the 50s, like you would still see that there would be some number of Americans living in London, because London has been it's very much a very widely diverse international type city. Like there's a lot. I think I've heard the quote that there's not many Londoners left in London anymore. Of like that, there's a lot of people from various walks of life living there. That you could very easily have Americans in your story as well, like in American descendants rather.
yeah, I mean, London is literally one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse, mega cities in the world, and we plan to represent that. We have people from all walks of life, and their cultures will still be prevalent. It also allows us to have certain factions, which I suppose, much like today, are still not accepting of that. So we'll have some sort of darker themes to it as well, but overall, we'll show how diverse London is. By having things such as Americans, we won't have that Americans in London per se. The
Okay.
big thing we'll have is Canadians, because at the time of divergence, obviously Canada was annexed by the Americans,
Right.
and that would have still been part of the British Empire. So a lot of those refugees have to go somewhere, and
Ah.
what better
Okay.
than Old Blighty? So yeah, we'll have a lot of Canadians.
Interesting. Yeah, that's actually a great those are some of the points where I can see having a lot of fun with taking the little bit of information that Bethesda has given you or Obsidian has given you and extrapolating out what that means. So in that term, like you think about US annexes Canada, there will be some number of Canadians who just reject that idea and they retreat to some other country that they feel comfortable in, and Britain would be an obvious one. So that's awesome.
Yeah,
Great thinking.
exactly. It's exactly that. And as I said, I give so much credit to Emily War, who she runs the writing department. And like, there are lore things which I hadn't even heard of that she has found. And it's just like, we need to do this. Exactly like the Canadians. Like, we are technically still part of the Commonwealth back in the Divergent era. And so, yeah, they would go somewhere. So they would come to England. That's why we put it in. And that's why we've got this big hoo-ha about what's happening to Ireland, and that was a big sort of contention between us because it's still a big bit of history which is a bit sort of frowned upon even today.
Okay.
So we decided to leave the things, although Ireland's been mentioned in people such as Kate, and it's been mentioned in terminals and consoles, etc. Things like that, we've decided to purposely leave out because there's no way we could actually represent it. If we say that Ireland become one country, people
Right.
from Northern Ireland would be upset, and vice versa.
Sure.
So there are certain things that we do have to extrapolate from that Bethesda has left out, and maybe things such as Ireland and England they've left out on purpose.
Sure. Yeah, that's very interesting because yeah, I'm sure a lot of people who are locals, like people actual players from the UK who play this, are gonna want to find out what happened to certain areas, and they're gonna want to hear some of that lore. But like you said, you have the potential of like stepping on some toes if you go too far with it, just because there you got the lore nerds, or you could scratch some wounds that maybe you don't want to open up like that. So that's interesting that you guys have a lot to think about. Basically, this is not a simple
Yeah,
story. Yeah.
yeah, and I think us as a team, like we, as I said, we adhere to the law, we love the law, but at the end of the day, real life has to come into it slightly. So we're not going to upset an entire country just because there's a small gap in lore. It's like we need to be respectful, and that's what we try and carry through the entire game. And by doing it and being respectful, it allows us to have some darker themes, so that you'll be able to walk into certain areas and go, "Oh, this is a big contrast compared to what I've seen in the rest of the game. These guys must be bad," etc.
Right. Yeah, that's a tough line to walk, and that's something that you see a lot in the games media right now. Of there's so much sensitivity in the world right now, and I think part of that is just kind of the whole world kind of coming to grips with like we're now all like in the same communication sphere thanks to the internet. Is that like now we're trying to mesh all these different cultures together and kind of come up to a new universal standard of what's PC. And so like there's a lot of contention right now with that, and so I can see why you guys are being careful with whose toes you step on.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good direction. I mean, we have a very diverse team in both sexualities and gender, etc. And we've tried putting that through in our game as well. I think it would be really amiss to suddenly have everyone as just like these standard drones that Bethesda seems to put out. We've started putting effort into some of our characters and effort into some of our companions, especially to make them very diverse.
Interesting. Yeah, that's one of those things where I think a lot of the drone factor of a lot of the characters just comes from the amount of. I think there's two factors to it. One, I think, is like in order to actually sell the backstory of a character, you need a lot of dialogue and you need a lot of a depth in talking to them for it to matter. Like where it's if you do it just if you just make it surface level, then you're just tokenizing. So it's kind of like a lot of the characters in Bethesda games tend to not have enough depth to bother with stuff like that, where you would just be tokenizing. So I think companions offer an awesome opportunity to dive into that because you actually get a chance to know those characters. You spend enough time with them where you get a chance to follow their quests and like actually have that dialogue. I really am a big fan of the companion system in Fallout 4. I think they really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, and we're going to go one further because of the fact we're based in London. I was a big advocate of using the voiced protagonist, but there's no feasible way we could. Like even when we looked into the lines, we thought maybe we could use this one, maybe that one. There was been no mention of any of the factions, so it was very limited. So we ended up scrapping it. So we're going to more with like a Fallout New Vegas RPG feel, and by
Sure.
using things such as the expanded interfaces, it allows us to be able to write pretty much essays in conversations with people and be able to really have an actual conversation that's not limited by a typical white American male accent. We can have you imagine whatever character you want and have a decent intellectual conversation with your companions. And we really hope to bring that across.
Awesome. Now that actually opens up another interesting question. So far, of all the major overhaul mods, the only one that's planning on allowing you to play your character from the Commonwealth in their mod is Fallout Miami. Are you guys intending to do something like that as well? Like there's a way for you to go from the Commonwealth to London, or is the plan that there's a fresh character, fresh story, and the two are completely unrelated?
So we originally were going to go with the idea of the sole survivor could fly across to London due to reasons, but that we weren't really selling that idea to both ourselves and the community.
Mm-hmm.
So now it will be a new game where you start off in London.
Interesting.
Now, that's not to say that after release, we know that there are people that were upset by that choice. We understand that and we respect that. So we have given the tools to some modders that if they decide that they want to bring the Soul Survivor across, they can do. So they will be able to do that. It will not be a part of our game. It will be up to modders to do that, but we are completely fine if someone wishes to do that. Because
Interesting.
we understand that people might want to be able to bring their character across, Some
Yeah.
people might want to be able to go to Far Harbor, Miami, Cascadia, and then London, whatever. Sure, we
Yeah.
don't want to limit people's playability. People who have been on their character for thousands of hours might not want to start a new game to play Billy Bob's from London. They might want their guy. So we're giving people the access to do that. But no, our game will be requiring a new game.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think often, like especially like I love doing this with Skyrim, is go downloading all the world space mods, and then it makes the world, even if I don't play through them all in that character, it just makes the world feel infinitely large, knowing that there's all these spaces that I haven't explored yet. I think there's a hope for that with Fallout 4 as some of these world space mods kind of come to fruition, as we're hoping to have the opportunity to be able to visit them all within a single character, because then it just makes the Commonwealth seem that much bigger. Or actually, I guess it makes the Commonwealth seem smaller because you have this larger world around you that you can still visit. So I think that's part of the desire people have for that. But I guess what I was getting at is one of the things you guys could have done, and maybe this already came up in discussion, was you could have revoiced your new character, your new main character yourselves, if you opted for the breaking free of the sole survivor.
So, oh, you've opened up a wormhole. So this is a big conversation between the development team. Now, I very much had to say one way or the other, and it was we either go with a sole survivor and the voice protagonist, or it will have to be a new character without a voice. Now, if anyone out there fancies sitting inside a voice control booth for 10,000 hours or however long it takes to record all those lines, by all means, please do that and then contact us. But we have spoken to many voice actors and they said, we're fine doing like enemies, we'll do companions, but a protagonist? No. It's just so much work. And even then, there are certain people out there which they want to imagine what their character sounds like. Even if we do find someone who sounds much like myself, being a Londoner, that they might not want that. Maybe they want to imagine that they're the sole survivor who lost his voice. By adding in a voice, we still detract from that. So again, it's up to modders. We literally invite modders a lot onto our team, and they can do what they want with our game. So if it enhances people's play, then fine, they're allowed to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting with the voice thing. So I'm very curious how people are going to feel about this long term, and I think we might find out 10 years from now with Fallout 5. Although by then it might be that the technology is such that audio simulation can happen in games, and then you just choose kind of the tone of your character, and then the game just generates your audio on the fly or something crazy like that. Who knows with AI? But
we had this with Saints Row 2. That character, it had 4 different voices. You could play as a Mexican sounding, an English person, an American, and that was fantastic. And that was for both males and females. It just seems so strange that Bethesda, being one of the head RPG games, has gone, right, here is your one voice. Enjoy. It's very strange to me.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's a cost thing. Like the amount of, like you said, like getting somebody in a booth for, I mean, it's from what I've read of interviews, those voice actors were working on that project, recording lines and re-recording for like a year and a half. I don't know how full time it was, but I imagine it was probably, I think the SAG, which is our Screen Actors Guild here, I believe it's like 4-hour sessions a day is considered like full time for a voice actor. So if they did that, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for a year and a half, that's a lot of hours doing the same character. So it could.
And that's exactly why we decided to go without a voice protagonist.
I honestly, this is one of those things where if it wasn't like, I actually love the idea of doing it myself, just as like a fun project of recording. Seeing what it would be like to just record all of the Soul Survivors lines again, because I'm actually surprised no one's done this yet as a Fallout mod. Just like some voice actor who's looking to build up a reel of just go sit in a booth and just slowly do that, and then once you get it done, just release it out there, just so that people had options. Because I think that would be a very popular mod. But yeah, the amount of work that would go into it, I think it would probably be a lot quicker than what Bethesda did, because you could just use all of the inflections that the actors already took, so you wouldn't have to. You wouldn't have to like react all the scenes or necessarily listen to all the corresponding dialogue. You could just kind of, listen to what the existing actors said and how they said it, and just, assume that they did it correctly and go with that kind of inflection. But still just a massive undertaking. So I get why you guys do it, but I would also assume you guys are probably going to have, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe with this deep system you guys are thinking about with character development, are you thinking line-wise for the protagonist that you're going to end up with something similar to Fallout 4 or maybe even larger? Because I think Fallout 4 proper, like the vanilla game, has something like 15,000 lines for the player. Do you have any estimate of where you guys are going to end up with yours? Obviously not being voiced, but still, it's relevant.
In terms of I suppose with what we're planning for the character to say in terms of its replies and that to some of the companions and some of the enemies, especially, that yes, we would in theory have more lines that would need to be recorded. But I
Wow.
suppose that comes piece and parcel with the fact that, because we don't have to have them voiced, we can write more.
Right, right. As soon
And
as you made that decision, you
that
would
was
start writing a lot more.
exactly. And there was definitely moments where in Fallout 4, I was just like, that's not what I want my character to say. I wanted something sarcastic. And I think British sarcasm is very different to American sarcasm.
Sure.
So that's why I said we're using the expanded interface so we can actually fully show what our characters would say. Because no longer do I want a sarcastic comment to be, screw you. Like, that's not sarcasm. That's just an insult. Like,
Yeah. So now are all so yeah, and I agree 100%, and I don't think anybody would disagree that like British humor and sarcasm is quite a bit different than American. Are you all of your writers from Britain?
we have a mixture, and that's done intentionally because not that we're saying that our humor's better, it is, but no, not that we're saying it's just very different. And there will be times where we think many of our audience might not pick up on some things. So we've made sure to have a diverse team. So yes, there may be some comments that the Americans or people from outside England don't understand. Yet English people will very much get the English humor, and
Okay.
then vice versa. There may be some jokes which English people think, it's nothing, but then the rest of the world might find hilarious. So we've
Sure.
just made sure to be diverse in that department.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting challenge because we actually have a funny thing going on. So the lead writer on our next project for Sim Settlements is from the UK, and sometimes we have to de-Britishify his his writing because we're trying to blend in with the vanilla game, which is kind of funny. So I'd imagine sometimes you're probably gonna have to do the same thing in the other direction if you're
Yes,
writing
yes,
if people are writing
definitely
for
in the other direction.
yeah.
Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, we have more words in our vocabulary than tea, crumpets, and the Queen. Right? Apparently, that's pretty much like our writers. Like, I've never used that word when I swear at people.
Yeah.
Like, where are you guys getting these from? And they're like, I found this online, and it's written by an American online. I'm just like, oh my, like, what's going on?
Well, one of the things that's also interesting with Fallout writing is how they deal with slang and whatnot, because you got to be also be careful that you're not using any modern slang in and because this is supposed to be an alternate timeline, but at the same time you also don't want it to sound too dry, although maybe you guys do for the British factor, but is you've got to be careful about which slang you use. And I think when you're talking about people writing for other accents or for other cultures, you do find that they will use more cliche slang and stuff. That is definitely something we've found when people start writing who are not American, that they tend to use pretty cliche American slang. So I imagine you have the same thing going on with the British stuff.
I mean, the thing is that I wouldn't say it's so much cliche with British because we do typically say these words quite a lot. So, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on an American show, but the term wanker, we use that all the time. And yet Americans typically use that as something which is rather stereotypical, but it's right on. It is a stereotype. We do say it a lot. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't have that where I can think of some off the top of American ones. And yeah, I know many Americans don't use them, but us
Right.
English people, we do definitely have certain words we like to use. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard what we would refer to as the C word, which is like super taboo here. And like that is just like regular. A lot of people I know from UK just use that as just part of conversation. It's just a no big deal.
Yes, us and Australians, yes, we can have a conversation just using that word as if it's nothing. Yeah, and
Right.
I have been since traveling. I have literally. I remember this time I was in Latvia and I was having a conversation with an Australian, and there was just this American guy at the table, and his mouth was slowly dropping more and more and more every time it was said. It was like, what? It's just a word. He's like, you can't say that.
Yeah, there's yeah, that's a funny one because it's like usually here you use that word as like a perfect litmus test for whether or not the person is going to be uptight or not, because people who use it here are like super easygoing. It's like, all right, you're somebody I could probably party with, versus like, all right, I need to wear kid gloves with you. because it's such a polarizing word here, which is funny. Especially you use that word around women here, and it's like I mean, you might as well just slap yourself or kick yourself in the dick because you just committed a crime. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's very funny listening to people from your guys' side of the pond talk like that, and it's very amusing. So
Yeah,
our,
that theme will definitely be kept over in our mod though. Like, so you'll be walking around and you will have a lot of moments where you're like, "Whoa, can you say this?" And the answer is yes, yes, you can.
oh, that's funny. Yeah, it's fun, and it's also funny with Fallout in general. There's a lot of weird stuff like that. There are certain things that like Bethesda has kind of drawn a line on, and they seem so arbitrary when you think about some of the other things in the mod. For example, there's no killing children. There's no nudity, but you can blow people's heads off. Like you can't say these words, but you can drop f bombs every third word. It's very interesting how that those those distinctions have been made. Seems completely arbitrary, so it'll be really interesting when you guys end up breaking that mold just by the fact that you're coming from a different culture.
Yeah, and we again, like a lot of our big decisions, we have debates on our Discord. So I'd recommend anyone that does want to get involved and actually wants to know a bit more to come on the Discord, because we always throw community feedback questions out there. And one of them was the topic of killable children, because we do plan to have a follower, which is a child. But when we say child, I'll clarify it's a teenager, because we're actually putting in a new age range, because apparently everyone in the vanilla universe is either about 10 years old or 30. So we are putting in like someone in the middle. But in order to do that, we would have to have the killable children. And so we gave that feedback out, and a lot of people just didn't care. They were like, "Yeah, sure, I have that mod," and it's just like,
Right.
okay, it's a thing. Like, this is a dark universe,
Right.
like, why suddenly can a child not be shot? Like,
Right.
but
Yeah,
again, I mean,
I've always thought about
it's
with the
not
children
concrete.
thing, you would think that children would be more hardcore, like they'd be trained in to fight and stuff in that world. Like the little lamplight, I think it was already established. Like these children like have guns and stuff, so of course they should be killable in that regard.
Yeah,
I'm one of those. I don't care. Like it doesn't bother me one way or the other. I don't care that they're not killable. I don't care if they were killable. It doesn't make it worse to me. It just seems like a very weird decision on Bethesda's part, and I am imagining it's only one of those things that's they're just trying to avoid media scrutiny, because like a lot of times you get people from the outside who just look at this and make a clickbait title out of it, like, oh, the Fallout 4 lets you murder children, and like that can become sensationalized just because people are bored. And from the outside, that looks horrible. But if you're a gamer or you're a Fallout fan, like the context, and then it's like, okay, well, if you actually look at the whole picture, it's nothing. Because
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And we're definitely having that in terms of I mean, again, it's not concrete that we're going to have this mod in anyway, but in terms of one of the themes that we have is that we have this walled off community. In there you will have like the children represented in Fallout 4, the ones who just walk around with teddy bears and blah blah blah, life's great. But
right,
then outside we have more like the children from Little Lamplight. They know that the world is rough, and that is a big theme between the sort of the elites versus the sort of the lower down community.
sure.
And that feel you should be able to see as soon as you go through. You're like, hold on, everyone is blissfully unaware of how bad the situation is outside these walls, and that will be reflected in things like children as well.
I love that.
And the fact that probably the community out there sees things such as dogs and cats as food, while
Yeah.
inside they're still pets. And this is me. I'm currently sitting in Peru. At the bottom of one of my workaways, they were selling guinea pig on sticks, and I'm like, what? I had them as pets as a kid. Like, that's shocking. It's
Yeah.
just culture shock. Culture,
Right.
different cultures.
No, I love that, and they've explored that a little bit in some of the Fallout games. Like they had Tenpenny Tower, and then they have the upper stands of Diamond City, but they never really harp on it too much. But the difference in world perspective in the class divide is so fascinating, and that's very cool that you're going to explore some of that, because I think
Yes,
that
that's a very
would.
strong theme.
I don't think that ever goes away. Like I think no matter how bad the world gets, I think inevitably people tend to separate into the classes. Like that's just been throughout human history. That's always happened. And so like exploring that idea is very, very interesting. And I think you have lots of opportunity to do that in the post world, where it's going to be very quickly, you're going to establish the haves and the have nots when there's so limited resources.
Exactly. And I think it's interesting you mentioned Tenpenny Tower, because I can confirm, due to the fact that our time period is about 40 years before Fallout, I think it's New Vegas, whichever one he appears in. you will be able to have another tenpenny showdown, but he will be a much younger man.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so. How do you guys handle that? So that's so. I mean, obviously, you're gonna have to deal with it less because you're on another continent. So it's hard to justify. You know, you'd have to come up with like immersive explanations for every single character that shows up. But one of the things that we always try and avoid with the writing is trying to have too many throwbacks to old stuff because then you get into that territory where everything sounds like it's like crappy fan fiction. How do you guys avoid that in the little bits where you do, or is it kind of solve itself in the sense that I would have mentioned that you're on another continent, so there's not even a ton of opportunities for crossover?
Exactly. I think there is Moriarty, there's Kate, and there is Tenpenny. I don't even think Kate's making the cut because she wouldn't have been born yet. And I think Moriarty would have been about 5 years old. And I think the only person that we plan to have in from the originals is Tenpenny. And that's him at, I think, about 30 or 40 years old. That's the only sort of confirmed throwback at right now.
Sure. So now what are you guys doing as far as I just lost my thought. Train of thought there. Settlements. So this is something that I like to ask everybody. Obviously, I'm known as the settlement guy. Are you guys going to embrace that system and put some support right in, or is that something where you're not going to touch it, and if people wanted to mod it in afterward, they could?
So settlements aren't really on our radar right away. We're going to finish building everything and working out where everything goes, and then work out where the settlements are to be. But yes, they will be in. There will not be that many, but we will give again support for people who want to add more in different areas, etc. But they will be in. They will be in dedicated areas.
So kind of like Far Harbor, where there's just a couple then areas that make sense.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, very cool. I think people are very excited to hear that because settlements are a very interesting thing. So like I've always been critical of the actual gameplay of managing the people. Like I think that's bad, but I think that they're a very, very cool reward in Fallout in general. Like the idea of, hey, this area is not being used, you can turn it into a base. Like that's a really cool idea and a really interesting reward for quests and stuff. And I don't think Bethesda took enough advantage of that. I think they gave them out too easily. I think it would have they had an opportunity there to make it, you know, a much big kind of like if you think about the player homes in any of the Fallout games. It's a big investment. It was always like a big deal. You had to spend a ton of money or you couldn't get access to them, and so that it was like a very big reward. I always thought they should have spent more effort on making you earn those settlements, and then that's a very unique reward you can give as opposed to just, you know, here's a gun, you know, I know you have 1,000, but here's a gun for your troubles or whatnot, or here's some power armor. Like power armor used to be a great reward. Again, that's another one given out too freely, I think a lot of people think. I am definitely in that camp. So are you guys going to do them as some sort of reward, or are they going to just be something you walk up and hit the workbench, or again, is this something you haven't put much thought into and I only am thinking about it so much because I'm obsessed with settlements?
No, I actually completely love the settlement system, and I also think it is given out too easily. So the ones that we do give out, they will be in very specific places, and they will have been hard to obtain. No longer will you have situations where you have like the back alley place where you have perfectly good buildings all the way around it, and yet you have to building a courtyard. There will be logical places and hard to obtain. So you would have to have cleared out the place through a mission or in a difficult way, and then you receive something. Plus, we are actually having a faction, which if you follow their tree, they will be much like the Nuka world, as in clear an area, claim it for a certain gang, blah, blah, blah. But in doing so, you will slowly help an area, which will be designated to you as a settlement, that will slowly get better over time. So it's like some of the existing mods, I think, for Skyrim that expanded the Thieves Guild. It'll be that sort of effect.
Oh, very
And
cool.
obviously you can start adapting on that as well. But yes, many of the things you've said, like even power armor is not going to be something in this mod because it doesn't reach overseas. The few that are there would have been militarized. So we have a couple of enemies and militaristic people, such as perhaps the Royal Guards is one of the things in our concept art. But that's it.
Right.
And you can't wear it. It is worn by a person. It is charged with a car battery. When you kill them, it stops working. You can't get in it. And there is no way for you to bring it over. That was another reason why we didn't want the sole survivor, because he will jump on his plane with all his companions, all his foreign guns, and his power armor, and
Just
then
become a
arrive in
warlord.
London. Yeah, and everyone would be like, "Okay, all hail the new king. Who
Right.
is the so
Oh,
yeah,
that's really
that's
funny.
down to the modders to fix. That's not
Right.
for us. As I said, we're having someone new.
Yeah. That actually seems like it might open up an awesome reward for when you're done and do something more classic Fallout style where it's like all this time you're playing through the whole mod and you've been denied this power armor, and then like at the very end you get a copy of the Royal Guard's power armor or whatever. Like something like that might be something you could explore, which would be probably pretty damn rewarding, because that was something I missed. I remember that when you finally get power armor in like Fallout 2, it is so amazing. You're just like, oh my god, because it's so powerful and it took so long to get it. And like there's always they almost make fun of you about it, because they'll be like, I remember several points in it where you're almost teased about the fact that you can't have power armor. Like you walk up to a Brotherhood soldier and be like, hey, can I get a suit of that armor? And they're like, sure. Yeah, right. And then like you just, you don't get it until so late in the game that you have the potential to maybe capture on something like that.
Yeah, I mean, in 4, you get it within the first 10 minutes of actually doing anything in the game. It's ridiculous. Yeah. In terms of rewards, maybe not power armor. I feel like you're far too generous. But in terms of rewards, yes, you will have to work your way for some of the rewards. Even weapons like a simple gun is not going to appear right away, because we have many people saying, "Oh, England doesn't have guns." I can assure you, England has guns. It's like everywhere else, and especially due to the divergence, they definitely had guns.
Right.
But,
I was gonna say, when was the gun ban put into place in actual
in real life?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. That's the writers' department to know that.
Right.
But no. Yeah, I mean, it was after divergence.
Right.
After World War One, primarily, and World War Two, there were a lot of guns in the UK. There was literally an amnesty for people to give them back.
Right.
But yeah, so in ours, having a weapons ban is not actually a thing. It's more the fact that ammo is hard to come by, because there was the resource war, there was civil war.
Right.
There are guns about, but not necessarily ammo. So we are definitely taking more of the RPG side of it, rather than just run and gun, which is, in my opinion, Fallout 4. Right. So there will be times and specific missions, due to some of the things we put in the game, where you're required to use melee. So it's actually, while you can still build gun builds, there are times you're going to have to hit someone on the head with a shovel.
So it's almost it's going to have more of like the pit feel to it, where you're doing more RPGing and using melee before you start getting access to some of the higher end firearms and stuff.
Exactly. I mean, one of the big things in our game is actually the fuel, and we've yet to release that, because we want it fully fleshed out before I can go into depth. But put it this way, you wouldn't want to be firing a weapon anywhere near it. So that is why there is more of a focus in those areas, at least, to use melee, because you would just blow up. And so would the enemy. So,
Okay, I think I can imagine what that is. I love stuff like that, where you have an immersive reason to limit the players, because some of the definitely players having access to high-powered firearms definitely takes a lot of storytelling and limits it, just because it's like the players can just logic their way to like, well, why wouldn't I just shoot this guy in the head? And like, so then it makes it like I know we've already run into some of that stuff in our own questing, where like we make you jump through hoops and it seems just gamified, but it's like, if we had more resources to give a proper immersive reasons or limitations in the story world, then we could justify that a little more. So now you have an opportunity to do something like that. Like this, I can imagine what you're talking about with some sort of, the area is highly combustible all over the place, and so like nobody uses firearms, just on principle of like it's a mutual assured destruction agreement. Like, let's not blow ourselves to bits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the last thing we want is, and we're not using this as a way to block players off, to clarify that. We are using this is because there will be times you have to go into these areas, and much like if you have to have a fist fight in a house with a gas leak, you don't want to pull out a lighter, because then you lose. Everyone loses.
Everyone loses.
We're just having those situations.
So would you say that your story is going to be more story driven and less gun driven? Because that's one of the complaints I think about Fallout 4 stories, is that almost every quest is resolved with a shotgun. There's very few diplomacy options or alternate ways to defeat quests. How are you guys approaching that? Like, what are your thoughts on that idea?
We have both, and we have made sure to have both. because originally we were going to go full RPG, and then we realized that there would be no point to even hit someone. So we are having it so we can do both things. So there'll be certain quests where they say, all right, you can go clear it out with a gun, or you can go do it diplomatically. It is
Right.
up to you. And both will have, don't get me wrong, but yes, we are giving the people who prefer the Fallout 4 system to go and shoot things, and we are giving people who prefer the older games the opportunity to go and speak their way out of situations.
Oh,
There will
that's
be a
good to
lot
hear.
more skill checks in our mod. We are even contemplating putting in a completely new perk system as well, so that would reflect this as well, because there are times, such as I think it was on the USS Constitution, where I actually got to use a skill in Fallout charisma.
Yeah.
We are having plenty more of those in there. We want people who have put points in science to be able to science things, medicine to medic things, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, I
Otherwise, it
really
just comes down to I can talk a lot or I can shoot.
right.
It's a bit repetitive.
Yeah, I do miss that a lot. And I think Bethesda saw that, as you can see, with they kind of relented with their updates coming to Fallout 76, where they're like, we're bringing back skill checks and stuff, is that there is not a lot of feeling like your character choices matter other than for combat sake. Even a lot of their outside of combat things, like, for example, the hacking perk and the lockpick, every single master lock or master terminal in the game, the password or key can be found somewhere in the cell. So, like, it's almost like all the those perks basically say, here, it's a time saver, and like that's kind of then takes away a lot of that feeling of where your character progression matters. So yeah, seeing more of that stuff sounds exciting, of like, here's an alternate way. And I guess at the end of the day, that is kind of what all of it is, because otherwise you gate people out of stuff. But actually mentioning the perks and letting people know why they got to bypass something, just I think it makes your choices feel very meaningful.
Yes, having very fleshed out characters is very important to us, and we are going to utilize that to the best of our ability. So, good luck to all of my Fallout London scripters getting that to work, but that's what I want.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Us scripters love a good challenge. I'll speak on behalf of your team and say that I'm sure they enjoy, because it gets, if without the challenge, like from my experience, every programmer I know who like really enjoys it and isn't just doing it for the paycheck, is we got into it because we like solving problems, and so when there's no more puzzle to solve and we're just doing things we already know how to do, then we get bored. So
Yeah,
my bet
yeah,
is
and
they're
that's
very
why.
appreciative of the puzzle.
Yeah, we've set challenges for every department, really. I mean, as I mentioned, Emily, who's the head of writing, she's setting up something called the Doomsday book, which is based off the Old English manual. But basically, it will be a comprehensive law book, which both appears in game as well as online,
Okay.
and it will basically allow people who have no idea that England even exists, as well as people who go, England shouldn't exist because of law. It fully explains everything from the perspective of a member of the gentry, which is one of our factions,
Okay.
and it will fully explain how we've set things up. So all those missing gaps, how we've filled them, you'll get to read it. There'll be no spoilers in it, but there will be parts in game where they act as perk magazines, where those ones will contain certain spoilers which will help for certain missions.
Yeah.
But overall, it will just be a comprehensive guide so people can understand what the hell is going on in Fallout London.
Interesting. Now, are you doing it like George R. R. Martin style, where it's written from the perspective of the characters who live within the game world?
Yes, I almost said C. Sorry, I've been practicing Spanish too much. Yes, yes, definitely. C. It will
Yeah,
be written from a man who has decided or been tasked by the gentry to write it out, and he writes it out.
that's
So
awesome.
everything you read will be from an in-game perspective. Yes.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I think Todd Howard has said they do that with the Dwemer as well. Like the idea of, if you have everything written from within the game world, then there's going to be biases in it, and so sometimes you're reading partial truths, or like truth from a certain perspective, and that's really interesting, and it leaves a lot of mystery in there, and a lot of room for wiggle room and room for interpretation. So it makes it way more interesting to read, I think.
Exactly, and that's why that when we have some as the perk books, etc., we'll have some which you can actually have a look through and read, and they'll have annotations done by someone else who's not part of the gentry. So you'll actually be able to get multiple people's perspectives on it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's actually one of the things that the engine doesn't really have a system for, and I wish it did. Like, I really wish it had like a full HTML renderer instead of the pseudo one it has. Because like we've done a couple of things where we've had book pages or notes, and we wanted like somebody to scroll in the margins, and the only way to do that is to put a giant new texture file in, and it's like, oh, that would be, such a shame we don't have a little more freedom on something like that.
Yeah, that's basically our technical issue with it as well. But we will try and overcome or do it the best way we can.
Sure. Well, one of the freedoms you guys have is, since you're going with the XDI interfaces, that you basically you're broken free from a lot of the restrictions that Xbox puts into place on these mods. For example, you can pretty much go nuts with file size, because I think most PC players are just going to be excited to have a new Fallout experience, regardless of how big the file is that they have to download.
Yeah. Our co-lead, a chap called Bonds, he originally stated that we were going to try and bring this to consoles, and we are still going to try and adhere to what he said.
Okay.
But the more we're adding in more custom assets, the more we're adding in things, the more this project gains scope and traction, the less likely being able to bring it to console seems. We'll endeavor to try our best, but definitely to PC. The other two is, well, PlayStation definitely not, because of everything that Sony has said. But Xbox, we hope, but there's no promises, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. I think once you break free into the you're using the. I mean, the only way you can even really make it happen is if you limit yourself from going beyond the 4 dialogue choices, because that's just a hard limitation for Xbox. But a lot of times, what these big mods are going to run into with for those players who are listening on Xbox is just that 2 gig file size limit. It's not even actually 2 gigs. It's actually a little bit less, because the game needs a little bit of that space for header data and stuff. So what ends up happening is you end up, realistically, you're like the biggest mod you could have is probably something like 1.8 gigs. And I think like if you just look at the size of, I think Far Harbor is bigger than that. So then if you're building something the size of Far Harbor, it's just not realistic to get it onto to get it on the console.
This is something we actually wrote down, because we have regular Q&A sessions on the first of every month, and we always get asked by the Xbox people, and we do feel sorry for them. And if they do manage to get something from us, it will literally be something for someone to walk around in, and that's even if that falls within the file limit. So You'll be able to walk around, it'd be a very bland, you'll have raiders or just whatever NPC we've plopped in there to fill in the gaps. But yeah, it would probably come across a bit like the not official Miami release.
Right.
Have a little wander around, but yeah, that won't reflect our actual game, unfortunately. So sorry, Xbox people.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier that you're going to be releasing a weapon, and is that something you're going to get to Xbox players? Because I noticed Fallout Miami did that recently with their quad barrel shotgun, and that seems like a great way to give Xbox players access to some of the content you're creating without having to commit to the full, limiting the scope of your project.
So we have given all of our modelers, animators, texture people, whatever, they all have permission, because the way I consider it, and I have been bound by my university, if I create anything of substance, I have to give them credit for it. No, I don't agree on that. So whatever our team makes and they feel like they want to release, because it's their work, they can release. So all we ask is they stick our label on it, say they made it for us, and then people can enjoy the things that were made from our game independently off the mod itself. It also lets us that, God forbid, this doesn't come to fruition. It means that people can play with everything that we've made. We're not just going to squirrel it away and lock it away. No. So the gun will come out, and yes, that will be available for the Xbox users. The Brody helmet, all the other things that we've made so far, the community will be able to enjoy.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, that is, that's a great way to look at it too. There are so many projects I've seen throughout the years of modding for different games where big teams will assemble, they'll do all this work, and then literally nothing sees the light of day because there wasn't any thought into releasing it individually. So it's great to see. I think this is just a sign of maturity, and all the different mod teams is almost every big Fallout mod team has had the same answer, which is just that, we're building things compartmentalized. We'll absolutely release what we can in chunks. And it not only benefits Xbox players, it benefits you guys as the creators, because you get to make sure that each of your artists get to see their stuff, released and in fighting form, as opposed to just dying on somebody's hard drive after God knows how many hundreds of hours of work go into them.
Exactly. And we feel that this mod is for the community, and our developers are from the community, and what they build is ultimately again for the community. So everything that we have will go out there at one shape or the other. Even if we give that horrible message and say sorry, it's no longer going to continue. Prilladog got shot going through El Salvador, or whatever the hell might happen to me. We will release everything for people to use.
That's very cool. So have you guys had to build a large new asset kit, or are you able to repurpose a lot of the? Because I know that the Fallout 4 build kit has a lot of it that's pretty generic, but there's also a lot of it that's very distinct, especially in its color palette. Are you able to repurpose a lot of that, or are you going to have to rebuild a lot of it because it's got too much Americana in it and you need to go to that more the building style of London?
So, silver lining is that Boston was actually made by the British, so it has a
Sure.
lot of our culture on there. So we're able to utilize quite a lot. Obviously, there are certain things that we can't use, and that's the wonderful department of our 2D, which makes it not look American.
Okay.
But yes, we are having to have lots of new assets put in. We obviously have all of the landmarks. Some of those are being made from creation kit assets. Some are being made from brand new 3D assets. We also have things such as the blast walls that I've mentioned that hold the gentry. They have all had to be made in 3D. We've recently released on our Discord some of the council houses, which also act as sort of blast walls. They have been released. And yeah, there is so much. Like, we have a very almost top heavy amount of 3D models. They are making so much for us, and it's so fantastic to the point where we are looking for concept artists to draw stuff for them to build. I am literally having to give my 3D team very minor things to do because they're creating things that are so fantastic so quickly. We don't have enough artists to draw. Literally, we are literally finding pictures on Google at this point and saying, build this for us, but make it look different,
Right.
because our team is so talented. I mean, we've got this one chap, KV, who he is making cars for us. And in one day, he went, right, I've done all the art myself, and now I'm building it. And he built like 2 cars in like a week. And we're just there, just like, oh my, we need to get more team members that can draw, because he's just firing all these vehicles. We're getting most of our vehicles done literally by this one guy alone. He's such an asset to the team.
So that's an interesting idea. It didn't even occur to me. Like cars, like especially back in the day, looked a hell of a lot different in Europe than they did in the U.S. So are you taking the same approach that Obsidian did with the Fallout aesthetic and basically take the 50s Americana and project it into what a retro future from their perspective? Are you doing the same thing from the British perspective? Take the 1940s, 1950s aesthetic of the UK and then retro future it?
I was about to say, I was insulted. You're implying that we don't have a history of cars that look ridiculous. We literally, if you Google English cars from that time period, they look like they can just be picked and plopped straight into Fallout. They are crazy. And we have literally had to tell KV to start adding cars with 4 wheels, because apparently we went through a era of just liking 3-wheeled vehicles, even on our big trucks, such as the Scarab Scamel. It's a huge lorry that delivers goods.
Yeah.
It has 3 wheels. It's crazy. So yeah, he's been firing through making all of these vehicles. And it's funny because the end result is, because we have a lot of compact cars, we all have, they're not going to be officially named this, but we all have them named privately in the dev department as different variants of potatoes. We have the Mini, we have the PLP 50. These are all just ridiculously small cars. And because we're near Europe, obviously we have the Fiat 500, which again looks like a small potato.
Right.
All these vehicles just are so dinky. When we built the British cab, it is the size of one of the American cars,
Right.
as it should be, because it's basically a people carrier.
Okay.
It's ginormous compared to some of our little cars. We're like, we might have to tweak the scale a bit, because the British cars are so small.
So thematically, one of the things that Fallout was, because it was commentary a lot on like the over commercialization and how that turned into us using excessive amounts of resources, which led to the resource wars, which led to the nukes falling everywhere. So that was based a lot on, you know, the direction and like commentary on American culture. How does British culture differ in that regard? So we had a thing, you know, we're kind of poking fun at over commercialization. So there's like giant billboards everywhere, and like the whole idea of Vault-Tec being this evil overlord company, and then all of the companies tend to have this like, you know, this shiny the 50s brought like the voiceover kind of hey chap, do you want to do this, and like making it seem like this like happy-go-lucky thing. And then in reality, there's dark stuff going on, and it was just kind of this whole thing. But how does British culture from maybe that same era, how does that translate into the future? Like, I don't know that, like, I don't associate British culture with capital, or with like, you know, excessive capitalism quite the same way you would with America. So how are you guys grabbing onto that to create your retro future version of London?
So we definitely have had to acknowledge the fact that one of the things that makes Fallout is the aesthetic. So we are having to obviously stylize things slightly like that, but with the European theme, or sorry, the London theme.
Okay.
But rather than go strictly against capitalism, what we basically have is that we do still have this lack of resources. We obviously have the resource war, which led England straight into the Civil War. So now, rather than America, who's just sort of gone, okay, we're running out of resources, we're going to start building things to go against China, England got thrown straight from the resource war, straight into the Civil War, literally one after the other. Now, that then means that we have enemies a lot closer than America and China. So we have to fight literally a World War III, and very similar to how the past two were done. So in order to do that, we have made it so that the people in London have had to come up with their own form of resource, because otherwise, how would you continue a war?
Right.
So in order to do that, we have basically done something which is quite controversial even today. And England has a long history of fracking. Okay. So England, in our setting, has decided to frack the world, and in doing so, it's caused major earthquakes to the point where pretty much everything outside London has been destroyed due to fracking. They have basically chosen that the capital city is going to be the one thing that survives. Everyone in the countryside can just deal with it, basically. That sort of shows how dark the government or the gentry is.
Right. It's like let's bring back feudalism. If you want to survive, come back and come live in the city. Otherwise, you're going to be you're a peasant outside the walls.
Pretty much exactly that. And so, due to that, you'll see in the game that most of the outside skirting of London is completely falling apart, and that yet they have this resource. By having this resource, it's also caused another issue, which is going to be mentioned as something called tunnel cough. That's a spoiler. I'm not going to go into any more on that. All my writing department will kill us. But yeah, basically, we have made it so that our gentry, the people who are in power, have chosen to survive. And the way they have done that is at the cost of the rest of England. And so that theme is the thing that we are bringing forward, as well as the things such as the diversity and all that sort of stuff, as mentioned before.
Yeah.
But that's the angle we're going on in comparison to the Americans.
Gotcha. So you're focusing more on the local politics and the kind of the class divide, as opposed to looking at it from the perspective of, because I think one of the things aesthetically you look at all of the Fallout games is that there's giant billboards everywhere, and like big buildings from companies, and just lots of reminders that you were in the midst of that corporate America had fully taken over. So are you going to have that same thing, but like billboards and stuff with like British versions of products, or are you avoiding that part of the aesthetic and focusing just more on the the maybe more like propaganda posters and things like that?
Yeah, so apart from Piccadilly Circus, we have never really had a big sort of history of that. So we are definitely going, bearing in mind we are literally, at the time this happened, at war again with Europe. So right. It will be more propaganda things plastered everywhere, those old things such as women and come into the factory and grow for England and blah, 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 that type of stuff.
Sure.
So we'll have lots of that posted around. But obviously it will have a more sort of fanatical or almost fascist theme.
Sure.
Because the government has literally gone, right, sorry, people outside London, you're basically at the whim of God, I suppose, because we're fracking the environment. If you survive, you survive. So a lot of it will be like, we are doing this for the survival of London, those sort of
Yeah.
posters, that we are doing this to win the war, you
Yeah.
know. And it's like the whole argument and theme behind it is like, why are they still fighting? They've ruined their own country,
Right.
or they're
Right.
fighting to win the war. So
Right.
that's the sort of thing. It's very much war based, and very much the gentry must stay in power, as opposed to, here, buy some Kellogg's cornflakes or whatever.
Right. No, that's awesome. That's a great theme, and it actually has vibes of what they did with what's the game? Frostpunk, where it was just like, like that, which was like steampunk UK, and it's like the the world's going to hell. We have to just do whatever we can to survive, and then everybody ended up. You had to choose between going a kind of fascist rule or theocratic rule, and it was like kind of that theme really worked, I think, in that post-apocalyptic setting of super limited resources and nonstop war. Like that seems to fit really well.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually currently going through an issue in real life Britain, which is actually quite scary for us, because we're looking at the fallout timeline of the events that happened, such as the Resource War and then the Civil War. And if you look at what's currently happening in England, all the dates are starting to match up. Like even the whole thing with 2077, like the Resource War happening in the Middle East, and then you're looking at the Civil War with the whole thing with Brexit and that sort of stuff. We're like, are we basically making this game for the future? It's a bit scary for us. So it's actually helping our team draw parallels and actually come up with propaganda, because it's happening right now.
Yeah.
But to clarify, we are not bringing any of that in the game. The idea of the game is meant to be a form of escapism from the bad things, but apparently you're gonna be playing real life. So
yeah, you can. I mean, it's hard not to draw the ties, especially like I said, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, is there's a lot of there's just so much like culture war jammed in our faces lately, because I think it's just kind of the world coming to terms with, we all live in essentially one common I guess town square, where it's like, the internet, everybody's sharing a space now. That there's a lot of that gets shoved in our face, and I know a lot of gamers really get annoyed with that, of just like, let me escape, like but so it's impossible for you, even if you tried to avoid it 100%, people will draw their own parallels and metaphors to it and be like, oh, they were clearly saying this, even if that's not what you were saying. So I don't think there's any way you're going to be able to avoid it.
Yeah, we have this asked every single question and a session, which is Brexit. And I will say this, and this is without a shadow of a doubt, it will not be in the game. It will not be mentioned. It is not a thing. The Divergence puts it way before, and in the game, everyone is all happy in Europe, apart from the Civil War. So that's as much as we go into it. There is a civil war, as the law describes, but no, Brexit is not a thing. So if anyone has any questions, doesn't matter. It's not a thing. Because, this is one of the hot topics that comes up every single time.
Sure.
No, not a thing, guys. Sorry.
Well, and I think what you're doing is exact, and I think the American logic within the game, or in like the whole storyline in the American side of things, follows this logic, which is that when resources get really tight, you're going to see that countries are going to tighten up and kind of go. And I mean, again, this is one of those things where you can kind of see a real life allegory, which is scary. Is that people tend to go isolationist? Is that they like, gather up all their resources locally and their allies locally, preparing to fight for what's theirs. And it sounds like that's kind of the story you're embracing there, is like London's like, what, the rest of the world is screwed right now. We're going to frack. We're going to tighten up our own control locally. And so then you end up with the opposite of Brexit. You almost is just like, I guess it's kind of similar in that regard. But you never, like, you weren't exiting out of a democratic decision. It was more just like the stresses of life and realities like forced it into that situation in your storyline.
I mean, Europe has a history of fighting itself because it has nothing better to do. And I suppose in our game it's basically the same. I mean, rather than all of Europe going, okay, there's no resources, let's work together and build solar panels in this place to solve everything. No, we're just going to start killing ourselves. And that's basically what's going to come across in Fallout London. Yes, it'll be more fleshed out than that. Sure. I am speaking off the cuff. This is the writing department's job. And I can already imagine that anyone who's going to hear this from my team is going to be screaming. But that is the gist of it.
Right. Well, I mean, anytime we talk about things at a thematic level, is you break it down into sound bites so that It's easier to digest. Because otherwise, the other thing we don't want to do is give up too much of the story details talking about this, because then it won't be as exciting for people to explore. Because I think that on top of exploring the world itself, and I think this is one of the places where I keep critiquing 76 where they missed the mark, is part of the fun is also exploring the intrigue among the characters themselves and seeing and learning how the world unfolds and like how it's all put together. And like without that's part of the secret sauce that makes Bethesda RPGs work. So
Exactly, and that is what the Doomsday that I mentioned is going to come into form of, because the character will go around and work out the intrigue. It will work out where he has to go, what has happened in history, but at the same time, we are going to have to bring the player up to scratch. So that's what this book will be. It brings the player up to scratch to the point that they know everything they need to know. Everything else will be investigatory from the player's perspective. And again, as I said, because this book will be wrote by the gentry, you'll be reading things where the player's going in game and going, this doesn't feel right. And then they'll be able to go, now I understand why they're saying XYZ. It's because they don't want them to know about ABC.
Right.
So that's for the player to understand. But yes, that the guide that we're making will bring people up to scratch, as I said, and everything else will be up for the player to understand.
Sure. Now, is that going to be like mandatory reading to enjoy the story, or will it just be, it's kind of like a deeper, if you really enjoy a lore-based RPGing, you're going to just really get a better experience by reading that?
The latter. So it's more for the lore monkeys out there who want to understand and grasp everything. The books you'll find in game will suffice for the average Joe who just wants to play.
Right.
I would personally say it's recommended reading, but that's because I'm the project lead.
Sure.
so yeah, I mean, you don't have to read it, but read the books you find in game. Otherwise, yeah, if you love the lore, this is the bit for you.
Yeah. So this actually segues into something that I found very interesting with RPGs, and I've actually turned as I've got older on it. Is I used to be more hardcore about wanting to have to puzzle out things in games. Like I used to be a huge fan of, and I still have a lot of nostalgia for them, of old adventure games where you weren't handed quest objectives. You were given approximate ideas of what you were supposed to be doing, but mostly you had to pay attention to dialogue, you had to read books, you had to look for clues in the world and figure out how you're supposed to do things. And that's been lost more and more as games have evolved. And personally, that's been a boon because I don't have as much time to play. So I don't have all the time to puzzle through. Like I want to get to the rewards a little quicker. But for players who have a lot of time and enjoy diving deep, there's a big hole, I feel, in a lot of modern RPGs where that itch isn't scratched. You don't really have to pay attention. Everything's just handed to you with a quest marker. What are your guys' philosophy on that, and how are you handling it? Are you going Fallout 4 style where everything is very distinct in what you're supposed to do? There's quest markers, or are you going with a mix, or are you going a little more vague? Like, what's your thoughts on that and your approach that you guys are handling with Fallout London?
So this was actually, it's surprising you mentioned this because no one else has even asked this, I'm very much of the opinion as you are. The older I've got, the less time I have to play. And as much as I would love to spend hours to try and find one man to solve the last bit of the puzzle, I feel that, yes, gaming has come down more to like Fallout 4. Go here, do this, which is a shame. But we are going to try and implement things a bit like escape rooms, I suppose, would be the closest thing that comes to the top of my mind. So there will be definitely times where you get a person that says, oh, I've lost my cabbage, go get my cabbage, blah, blah, blah. And you bring it back to them for money or whatever. Yes, there'll be those. But there'll also be certain scenarios where we'll have like the quest marker will just be pointing at a door, but it'll be locked. And then you're just stuck in this room. And then that is when you actually have to use your brain. And then you'll be like, how do I get to this door, which it tells me to go through, because that's what the engine does.
Yeah.
And how do I do that because it's locked? And that's when you have to use your brain for a bit. And
Right.
I can imagine there are people who go, nah, I'm not doing that quest, which is fine. But then there are people who go, wow, I actually have to use my brain. So we are really trying to put all these things in for people to do. We don't just want fetch quests.
Yeah.
I've played many mods where it's just fetch quests, and that's not a game for me.
Ah, sure, sure. Yeah, it's interesting how that goes because I've read a bunch of and watched a lot on YouTube. Thankfully, all these people release all this information, but there's been a lot of new studies about how the brain works, and that there's a part of our brain that's more automated, and it's like the short term memory side can only hold a few things, and then the rest of our brain, which actually does the work, is that people tend to reject if you force that second part of the brain to activate too much, and so then a lot of people. But then there are other people who are, the more, I guess, cerebral types, people who like to, read a lot and solve mysteries and stuff. And then those people are going to really engage, who want that second part of their brain activated. Is that it's interesting that we're finally figuring out how that all works. And I think part of it is if people are engaged enough in your story and lost enough, they're more likely to appreciate and be willing to activate that second part of their brain, which feels like kind of work. It's very, very interesting, the psych that goes into all this stuff, and that part of the way you can get people to accept it is if you've done a good job with your storytelling.
Yeah, and that is why we know, because originally at the start we just had a few people writing up quests. This was why we actually delved into an entire department to do this, because we want people to have the best experience for the type of person they are, and that's why we have the diverse people working on diverse different types of quests for you guys to enjoy. And I think a big thing as well is I can say all these things and it just sounds like me blowing smoke up your ass, to be frank, but this is why we are thinking about doing a stepped approach, because in the grand scheme of things, a small team to do everything I've said just on this sounds like a monumental task worthy of Bethesda itself.
Right.
That's why we're thinking of doing a stepped approach, because that way we can see the feedback from the community and just say something like a small area, even like 5x5. I know it sounds tiny, but it will give people a feel of the game, where we're going, and it won't be the full experience, no, but it will allow us to go, here's part one.
Right.
You go and do that bit. You get to feel everything. If people go, you know what, this is dog shit because all of these quests are really hard for me to do, then we're like, right, well, part two, we'll cut down on it. Part three, and it will all come together as one big game. But we definitely feel that that's the way we should go, because I'll be honest, we're not Fallout Miami, we're not Cascadia. I'm not blaming these people; they've got their projects to do. But we've tried reaching out to some of the big boys in there. We don't get the feedback. We know we're the underdog. We work with other underdogs, so that's why we're going to do this stepped release. We would love to be able to give people one big solid mod, go enjoy it. But we know it's not feasible because, as I said, we're the underdog. So we're going to do the stepped release. We'll go on feedback and we'll work it out.
Well, I mean, I will tell you, because we're doing a stepped release with Conqueror, and I think there are pluses and minuses. It's kind of like going the early alpha release that a lot of AAA games are going now. That there's pluses and minuses to it. The plus is that you get a lot of feedback on the way, so that you can get you're headed in the right direction. You also get a lot more testing done, so that you can polish a little quicker and find those issues, and then make sure you're not repeating them throughout development. One of the negatives is that a lot of players won't come back, which is unfortunate. Like, you release, you get all that hype, and then a lot of those players are never going to come back and experience the rest of your story. So then all the bugs and problems they ran into their first playthrough, that's the impression they are left with for the game forever. But one of the reasons that we're doing the stepped approach is because it keeps our team super motivated. It's much easier on a smaller team to be able to deliver content on a regular basis if they know that they're going to see all their work come to fruition, so it can be motivating. And I think what we're hoping for, and maybe you guys will do, are hoping or thinking along the same lines, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, is what we're hoping is that once we get to a point where our main story is done and is all completed and we've got all that content released, then we can start up a new marketing hype campaign to get people to come back and try the full thing.
Exactly. That is 100% what we're hoping for. And I think, again, because we're a small team, if after the first release that people go, okay, it was novel, that's enough, then we have achieved a release of a mod for the community to enjoy.
Sure.
If people don't want to come back when we want to do further ones, providing it went well, if people don't want to come back, then fine. Sorry for them. It wasn't for them.
Right.
But I said, we're doing this for the community. I know I want to play Fallout in London. That's why I'm the project lead.
Right.
And I'm sure some other people do. And, it's probably going to be like part 1, part 2, part 3.
Sure.
And after part 1's done, which will be the hardest one, 2 will get easier, 3 will be out quite quick. Because
Sure.
if we're going to do it logically, part 1 will probably be central London, then the outskirts, and then further outskirts.
Right.
So, just stick around for the whole thing. Like, why wouldn't you? It's a download. You get more content.
Right.
But
yeah,
I can understand your points completely. But we're just being realistic. We don't
Right.
want to be another mod that says we're going to do all these amazing things and then fail. We're aware of
Right.
how many people have these large world mods. That's why we're just being realistic. Small baby steps, go on and on and on. And then once all done, we're going to compile it, a new upload on Nexus, and say, look, it's all done. We've fixed everything. Enjoy it in one go.
Yeah.
Thanks for waiting. And I think that's the best way to do, because I'm hyped for Cascadia, I'm hyped for Miami, but I've just got to wait for them.
Right. They're probably several years away still. And like by then, I think the other risk always too with dragging these projects out so long is you end up in the state where, if are you familiar with the like the Morrowind remake that was going to be remade in Oblivion, and then Skyrim came out. Like it took them so long, but then it's like, all right, now we're going to make it in Skyrim instead, and it's like, all right, well now you have to redo a whole lot of work to bring it up to modern standards, and that cycle can continue indefinitely.
Yes, that happened with. I didn't know of that one. I know of. I think it's New California. Was it the one for 3 or New Vegas?
Yeah.
And I know that people enjoyed it. I'm sure the team did amazing things, but I know a lot of people panned it because they were like, "Oh, well, it's not like Fallout 4." Well, yeah, because they're making it on a really old game,
Right.
and that's one of my worries. We've had several team members who say that I'm too driven. I'm pushing them too hard, bearing in mind they're not being paid. And I say to them that I don't want this mod to come out in 2-3 years time, because Fallout 6 or 5 might be out.
Right.
And at that point we might have to change everything.
Right.
Or people just won't play it. You'll lose a player base just because there's a new game. Who wants to play an old game? Especially as one that, Fallout New Vegas had good things going for it. Yeah. Fallout 4, I know, didn't have the best reception. So, if 5 comes out and it's amazing, so, people might not want to play 4. So we have that risk. So that's why I want to just do something at least.
Sure. Absolutely. 100% agree. I think, the term I keep repeating that I heard in a GOC or a GDC talk was real artists ship. If you're not shipping, then you're just kind of spinning your wheels. So you got to actually deliver that product to people, or you're not actually creating anything if it's only for you. Like if it just sits on your hard drive, that's not very useful.
No, that's exactly true.
So yeah, that's definitely an approach I agree with. And one of the things that I always argue the point that people will say Fallout 4 wasn't well received. I would say that it was very well received. It did a lot of things right. I think it just rubbed a lot of hardcore Fallout fans wrong for certain decisions to ditch a lot of the RPG elements. But I still think that most folks have trouble going back and playing even New Vegas, in the sense that like the graphics are like the graphic improvements are substantial in Fallout 4. The gunplay is amazing. Like all these new systems are such dramatic improvements that like I think people don't want to go back to the old game, even just for those reasons, and that it's what they really want is to take all those elements that are missing and just add those in. And you guys are doing that already. So you're taking things like adding more RPG elements where your character choices matter. You're moving away from the voiced protagonist so the players can kind of voice the character in their head and have a deeper dialogue system. So you're kind of solving a lot of those problems. So I don't think people want to go back to the older games in general. In like even when you talk about games where the previous incarnation was maybe more is spoken more highly of in retrospect, I still think even those players who are say New Vegas is a better game probably still would prefer to play Fallout 4 just from all the improvements that have been made.
Yeah, I mean, I must say that I have mass respect for all these new world mods such as Miami and Cascadia and myself, but also the ones that I'm really looking forward to for the exact reason are the new remakes of like Fallout 3 and New Vegas, just because you're updating it all. And although we can all disagree on Todd Howard's practices for releasing Skyrim for the 17th time, it was nice. Like, why would you not want to play Skyrim on a machine that looked amazing?
Right.
Like, it was an amazing game. And it just meant that I didn't have to use 15 dodgy mods. I can now just use their one dodgy game.
Right,
So,
right.
so yeah, it was, I can understand why people want to have these really updated games.
Yeah. Oh,
And
I mean,
there's a trend in that in the industry completely. Like even
yeah,
Call of Duty's doing it, it's remodeling. Like because they know it's easy for money for them because they don't need to make a game, they just need to remaster it. But people
right.
want the old classics to look nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Because yeah, we have this great nostalgia for like the stories and whatnot. But usually the gameplay ends up feeling clunky and the graphics look bad. So we want to see some of those things updated, but like keep the story in it because it was so good. It's the
Yeah,
same idea with a lot of like Hollywood keeps going back into the well and remaking films and. I'm not a big fan of the way they do it because the movies tend to be they try to modernize everything. I think it would, but like games, they seem to be taking the stories verbatim and they're just like, here, we're gonna update everything
yeah,
else, but you get that old story you loved, which I think is a great way to go.
yeah. Video games are doing it correct. They are literally just copying and pasting it into new engines where they just look great. What Hollywood's doing is horrifying. They're just like, oh, let's release RoboCop into this CGI monstrosity. It's like, oh, okay. I preferred the one before where he was ripped in half and it looked real,
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I think for us as a team, we acknowledge how people do prefer the older games, and that's why we're trying to bring so many of those elements into Fallout London, so people can get the older games experience in this modern engine and in a new world.
sure, absolutely. And I think to your point about doing it step release because you're a smaller team. I think one of the things that also comes out of that is you drum up a lot of goodwill in the community and respect, and that leads to higher recruitment rates, which then will let you not only achieve your next stages faster due to you guys having more experience, but also because you'll have more people to attack the problems with.
Yeah, that is a completely correct point. Like as I said earlier, that we need concept artists to draw for some of our 3D guys who are sitting there idle. Like we are having to send some of these guys like stick people and say try and work off this because we are overworking certain departments because we have such talent on the other side. I
Yeah.
thought it'd be an issue finding talented 3D guys, but apparently everyone and their mums can 3D model these days and can do it well.
I think
Apparently,
it's it depends on, like, every team has their own droughts. Like we have a ton of great concept artists, we don't have a ton of 3D modelers, for example, or we have a lot of great coders, but we have very few, or we have no animators. So I think it's like every team seems to have a bunch of people, or
animators, I swear, they are the most elusive things
oh,
in the
absolutely.
world. I think we found a couple, but they're bogged down by real life, which
Yeah.
is as every team is. But it's just like you find one, you hold on to it like it's a bit of gold. Like,
Right,
don't
right.
leave me. I need you to create this gun or whatever.
Yeah. I think
And that's
that's
another thing. We've got so many guns which we don't want to show the community yet because
sure.
until we get an animator for it, it's just an object.
Yeah.
We have to give you some spoilers. We have an advanced version of the Well Rod, which was a silenced pistol. We
Okay.
have a Bren gun. We've got some other ones which I can't announce yet. But but they're just sitting there waiting for an animator
Right. Well,
or
I
for our
think that's
animators to
one of
come
the things
back
with the
to them.
animators is their work is so difficult, and to do well requires such high skill level that
Yeah.
like I think we're just at a point where the tools haven't quite caught up to some of the, like, the 3D modeling tools and the texturing tools are so amazingly advanced and
Yes,
so
they are.
easy to
Yeah.
use compared to 15 years ago, whereas animation tools still require a lot of people having a good eye for it. So I think it's one of those things. The skill is so highly valuable in the industry. It's hard to find people who are looking to build reels or anything right now.
Yeah, we've got some people that have worked in the industry and they all have things such as Substance Painter. And there I was like, don't worry, I'll just texture this. And it took me like, I don't know, like a couple of days to texture something. And they were like, oh, well, I just did this in about 15 minutes and it looks
Right.
better than yours. Because I'm used to the old school ways of opening it up in like Photoshop being the most advanced program. But
Right,
yeah,
right. And you
opening
had
up
to,
in
like, think
Photoshop.
about how is this gonna lay onto the
Yeah,
model, and yeah, you would use, like,
yeah,
okay, I got my layer with my wireframe, so I can kind of visualize it. Here's a shaded layer, so I can see kind of how. Yeah, it was a
yeah.
real pain in the butt to do
Yeah,
texturing.
I used to do lots of skinning stuff for. That's the thing. I still call it skinning. That's how old I am. So I'm skinning models for Star Wars Movie Battles 2, which was a mod for uh, uh, the Knights Republic or something like that.
Okay.
It goes so long ago. And there I was doing it in probably Paint or Photoshop, and then I
Yeah.
got all these talented guys just doing it in Substance Painter and the advanced version of Photoshop that they bought from actual money rather than acquired it somehow. And the stuff they're coming out with is just fantastic. And I'm there
Yeah.
just sitting there with Paint 3D or whatever it is on this laptop. I'm just like, okay, I
Yeah.
guess I'll just stick to world building. Thanks, guys. So,
Yeah, it's pretty incredible seeing that stuff. Like I remember I used to do skins for Quake 3, and like just remembering what a pain it was to do them to look good. And now I've watched people do their workflows in Substance Painter. It's like, oh my god, that is miraculous. Like so much easier,
yeah.
so much faster, and the results are infinitely better.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Quake 3 was the same engine as this Jedi Knight Academy game I'm talking about. So I know your pain, and seeing what these people do now, I'm just like, crazy.
It'll be interesting to see how, because I think one of the places where we'll see super advancements in animation and where we'll start to see more happen in the modding community, because the modding community always benefits from all of the industry advancements, just like the rest of, like the actual gaming community. But we're always a couple steps behind because we have to wait for the developers to not only have the tools themselves, but then make a simplified version they can release publicly. But yes. I think one of the things we're going to have soon, which will be really, really awesome, are two things. One will be AI-driven animation, and two will be motion cap using VR systems. So some of the consumer, there's already a system that I've actually been looking into, starting to experiment with. I just I have too many things going on, too many projects. But there's those sensors you can get for the Vive, where you can basically attach them to your limbs and stuff. And there's a open source program working on using those for mocap, so that you can basically use your home VR setup to do motion capture, which would be
wow. I mean, I've worked in mocap stuff when I was at university, because I did like computer science, and it sort of covered all this sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were just amazed with what like the mocap stuff could do. And this was just like some budget university stuff. So
right.
If considering like technology now, like it would be so fantastic. I mean, I know I've heard rumors that one of the reasons why animation is so hard was due to Bethesda trying to cut down on sex mods. I hope that that's just a theory.
That's just got to be a theory. I think it's just a matter of.
I hope it's a theory. But if that's the way that I would be, I would hope Bethesda wouldn't limit people's chance of create. Granted, they're creating strange things, but
right.
they are creating nonetheless. I hope that Bethesda wouldn't do that.
I can actually tell you exactly what the problem is. The issue is that they use Havok to do all of their animation systems, and Microsoft bought up Havok around the time that Fallout 4 was in development, and basically cut off the Havok used to be free and very open, and then it was you could pay for the advanced modules to do like cloth physics and stuff, and basically Microsoft bought it up and discontinued all the free side of things. So basically they weren't allowed to bundle up the necessary plugins to do the advanced stuff, so you can't create new behavior files. So that's the reason that it's such a pain in the butt. So
I like my version.
Yeah, I hope that with Bethesda, I know they've talked about in some of their interviews that they have a whole new animation system for their next game. So I'm hoping that means that they will also build in continue what they've been doing with their creation engine, which is that everything is super modular and very, very abstracted and easy to add stuff. I mean, and easy, I'm doing air quotes here, because it's obviously, like as we talked about earlier, that some of this stuff is so abstracted and convoluted that it's the learning curve is massive. But once you get past the learning curves on some of these things like the weapon modification system are incredible. Like they're so powerful, and you can do anything you can imagine. There's very few things stopping you from taking what's in your head and making it into a mod.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to the advancements. I mean, as I said, some of the stuff that we currently have for our mod, like I look at some of the stuff Bethesda's churned out, and then I look at what a 15-year-old has made, and I'm like, wow. I mean, I really hope that at the very least there'll be some stuff in our game and like the content, which will be amazing for people.
Yeah, Well, I'm looking forward to it. Do you guys have anything that's released yet? Like, have you done? I know you have all these armor and weapons and stuff you've been talking about. Have you guys started releasing any of that? And maybe that I can link down below for folks to go download now.
I'm sure I can get some links over to you. I'm just trying
fantastic.
to think. There are a lot of the stuff we've done is it still requires certain little tweaks. For example, the gun I mentioned, it's ready to go. It's just in the strangest situation. The guy who made it, he is Russian, and he is currently trying to leave Russia. So we are giving him a little pass on having to delay.
That is a higher priority. Yeah.
Yes, when he escapes, then yes, you guys will have a new weapon to play with. But yes, apart from that, yeah, we have some things, but a lot of them are like walls. Like, what would you do with a wall?
Sure. Hey, you know what? People love workshop items. We'll say that.
but they're the size of buildings. Like,
oh yeah, that's a little different.
You stick one of these down, it would take up the entirety of Sanctuary or something. You don't want that.
So do you guys have somewhere? I know you've talked about Discord. You guys use you're Discord centric. Mm-hmm. Do you have anywhere aside from Discord? Although I will say that update that Discord just put out with the server folders is amazing and gonna make me use Discord a lot more. Personally, I take invites to people's Discord servers and then I leave them after my business is done because my bar is so cluttered. But now with the folders, that's gonna change everything. I'll actually stick around in people's servers. But outside of the Discord server, do you guys have anywhere else that you deliver information? Do you have a website? Do you have a YouTube channel, Facebook, anything like that where people can follow you?
Yes, we pretty much have the full complement. We actually had an old PR person who has now left the team because of real life issues. But
the common story.
We are now re-updating our Twitter, which we have. We have YouTube. We also have Facebook. We also have a new website coming out because the one I made on Wix.com was crap. So we have a new one that's coming out. So yeah, we have the full complement.
Oh, fantastic! All right, well, I'll make sure we get that stuff all linked below for everybody. It's funny that you mentioned like Wix and Squarespace. You watch all the commercials because both of those two seem to be in a perpetual advertising war. It looks so easy to build a beautiful site, but it's also so easy to build a real crappy site.
Yeah, that was basically it. I think I was watching some sort of history channel, and at the end I was like, "Oh, Wix! Oh, that looks quite good." And then I made it all, and the team were like, "Gee, Prilla, thanks." Like, okay, we'll have a new one made. So yeah, we're making a new one.
Oh, that's fun. Well, this has been fantastic talking with you. I'm very excited for this project. You guys are doing a lot of stuff that sounds really exciting. I love the fact that you guys are going to do some small releases of pieces you've been working on. You're doing the staged approach. I think there's a lot of positives to that as a small team. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to mention or bring up? So before we go, so that we can make sure the community is aware of that.
Not as much, really. I mean, you've pretty much covered everything. But I would say that if anyone literally wants to help us out, as I said, we are one of the smaller teams. We do not have the accessibility that some of the larger ones get. So if anyone wants to help us out, just join us on our Discord, and we can actually work with you. We always set up a small little task, and then people tend to come back with something amazing, and then they join the team. Fantastic. But yeah, any help that we can get from the community, we do appreciate it tenfold.
Well, on that note, are you guys so small you need people with experience, or do you have tutorials and resources and people who can help teach to help those folks who maybe have a skill set but don't know how to apply it to modding? Because that is something that's pretty common in the community.
We have people that are teaching, and we have had people that have come on purely as, say, 3D, and now they are working in the creation kit. So we do have that capacity. We're not that small, but It's more the fact that there are definitely certain areas where we could do with more team members. And if you can fill that, specifically things such as concept art or animation would be fantastic.
The unicorns.
If you do want to get involved, I'd say just please come check us out. We can maybe teach you, not from scratch.
Sure. You got to have a little bit of an outside skill.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you need some help with things, we have very talented team members. And as I said, we have a surplus of 3D guys. So they can definitely help you out while we're waiting for drawings. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. So if you're looking to see London imagined in Fallout 4, information below to join that team or to learn more about the project. Prilla, it's been great talking with you. I hope to see some stuff released from you guys soon, and I'd love to have you on again sometime, and we can follow up and see where the project is, or maybe I can talk to some other of your leads who want to delve a little deeper into some of the specifics of their departments.
I'm sure they'll want to talk to you. I'm sure I have many questions from them waiting on my Discord already.
Right, like how bad did we butcher this?
I don't know. But yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be on. And I'll try and be not in a hostel next time we speak.
There were only a few instances where I could hear crazy stuff going on in the background, and I'll try and mute that out.
I've been running around the hostel away from everyone.
Fantastic. All right, great talking with you.
Yes, thank you very much.